Hello, everybody. Hello. Hi, welcome to Ausome. Woo! I know you guys are having fun networking and everything, and I'm going to give you another chance to network. But before we get started, what I'd like you to do is turn around and introduce yourself to one person you don't know. So take a couple minutes to do that, please. All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to use this mic for one more second, and then I'm going to start speaking without mic. Hello. Yeah, I know. We're going to get them all focused up here. All right, everybody, if you can end your conversations and pay attention, our speaker is going to get started tonight. Thank you very much. We'll give you plenty of chances to talk after. Thank you very much. So, again, welcome to Ausome. We're Ausome's #1 online marketing meetup. We're here to bring you special content for people in the online marketing world and startup community. And if you don't know me, I'm David Vogelpol. I'm one of the organizers. There's people that do a lot more work to make all this happen. And some of them are there in the back. We have Kelsey and Allison and Cecilia. So if you guys could give them a round of applause, I would really appreciate it. I show up here early every month and prepare my introduction for the speaker, and these guys do all the work. So my job is really, really easy. And really thank them for that. Tonight, our food and beer, as usual, is sponsored by Affiliate Summit, and we also have a special drawing for a free pass to Affiliate Summit West in Las Vegas, despite all the signage saying that it's in New York City. This was based on a typo in an email we received. But this coupon code, which I'll wave around so you can't read it, will get you a free pass to Affiliate Summit. And we're going to do a drawing to see who wins the free pass to Affiliate Summit West in Las Vegas. All right, we have Marilyn Klassen. That's your wives. Okay, I'll trust you on this. We'll get this to Marilyn later. You can show me an ID with the last name. It's pretty unique. I think it's yours. Want to remind you tonight, if you're going to tweet, please use the hashtag #BeAusome. The WordPress meetup was talking about how bad you guys were at tweeting, so I'm just saying, if you're going to tweet, use that hashtag. Also, use the Meetup app and use it to take pictures and check in and upload those pictures. That helps us when we recruit new members and bring more interesting people in here, and also when we go to attract speakers, bringing good people into this meetup to talk about awesome things. And then we're also going to thank Capital Factory for hosting us here. I'll get more into Capital Factory here in a second, but I do want to thank them for hosting this event. So I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight. Before I do, though, I want to give you a little background on him and what he's done in Austin for the startup community and through us and other mechanisms for the online marketing community. I met our speaker Josh in 2010 at a co-founders meetup, and this was back when Capital Factory to my...
Is that one we did?
What's that?
Is that a co-founder meetup we did?
It wasn't one you did. It was at some tech center in North Austin. And he was talking about one of the companies that he was working with, and I introduced not really knowing who he was or what he did, and he ran this thing called Capital Factory. And it was a contest at that time, and I'm probably going to butcher all the details, so he can correct me later if I get it all wrong. But it was a contest, and if you entered your startup and you won, you would get some money, and then you get office space for the summer. And it was Josh's way of contributing to the community, getting new companies started, and of course, using that to grow those companies. What Capital Factory eventually became after that time period was what you see today. It's the office space up here on the 16th floor. It's now office space on the 5th floor, if I'm not mistaken, with plans to take over the entire 5th floor. What Capital Factory is essentially like an incubator for startups. So it allows the startups to come in here and rent desks. This is the co-working area, or dedicated desks that they have full time. And so what Josh has done through Capital Factory is help countless companies start and have a solid foundation, and then grow that foundation into profitable businesses. My company was a member at Capital Factory very early on. The relationships we got out of being here helped our business immeasurably, both financially and in the partnerships that we were able to establish. So our experience with Capital Factory has been very, very positive. In the Austin startup world, Capital Factory and Josh are some of the most influential entities in helping companies get started and helping them get on their path. So if there's anyone in Austin that you want to get advice for about starting a business or starting a startup, it's this gentleman. So I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight, Mr. Josh Baer.
Thanks. Great intro. Awesome. So how many of you, this is your first time at Capital Factory? Not many of you. Great, cool. So I won't talk too much about Capital Factory now. You guys probably know more about what it does. But this is a talk I've only done a couple times, but it was created in response to what I felt like so many people came up and wanted to talk to me about. Not so much the people that are here working at Capital Factory. Many of them already have a startup. But I would meet people all the time that would say, hey, I know I want to do a startup. I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship. I want to be, I've been studying this. I've been learning about this. I've been watching the videos. But they don't really quite know where to start. And that's really what this is meant to address today. So hopefully you'll find it helpful. Hopefully it'll work. There we go. So again, my name is Josh Baer. As my t-shirt says, my slogan is I help people quit their jobs. And part of that for me is really, I actually think of that as somewhat of a social mission. That's like the best thing that I can do to help the world, to help other people, is to go help them become entrepreneurs and be able to both pursue their dreams and their passions, and also kind of gain financial independence, and that gives them a lot of other flexibility to go do all kinds of other things with their lives. And it was really transformational for me. I'm really glad that I was able to stumble into entrepreneurship, and that's what I hope to be able to help a lot of other people to go do. Capital Factory certainly is a vehicle for that. But to get started with, I started my own company when I was in college. I was going to school during the first dot-com boom in the mid-90s, which was an incredible time to be going to school, to be studying computers, to be on the internet. I think it's just as cool now because there's still so much disruptive, amazing things happening. Back then, it was really when the beginnings of the commercial internet were starting. So people were just starting to put up websites where you'd buy stuff or sell stuff. And things like that. And so it was a really exciting time to be working on it. And I started my company in my dorm room. It wasn't some big idea I had. I didn't invent anything or get totally inspired. Actually, by the way, this picture, we lost the picture. This picture is my first company, Skylist, which is now called PostUp, right about the time that I sold it. So after running it for about 10 years. But at the beginning, it was just me in my dorm room. I got it back up. Well, we'll see if that comes back up. But the beginning was just me in my dorm room, and I knew I wanted to start a company. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I remember sitting the first week of school. I was doing a fraternity rush, and sitting next to somebody I had met, and we were talking. Because it was fraternity rush was all about free food and beer. So we're sitting there, eating some free food at one of these places that I ended up actually joining and being part of. And while I was there, he asked me, he said, hey, what do you want to do while you're here at school? What do you want to do when you leave school? What do you want to do after? And I said, I don't really know what I want to do, but I think I want to run my own company. I want to start a company. I look back at my family, and I had lots of entrepreneurs in my family, and it just seemed like working for yourself was the right way to go. But I had no idea what it was I was going to go do. And so went through my freshman year, and I was studying computers, didn't really know much about anything. And back at the time then, if you wanted to try out different kinds of software, the way you did that was to apply for the beta program. But unlike today, where pretty much you'd expect every beta program or beta software to be free, there was no free beta programs. In fact, Netscape, my freshman year of college, was the first open beta. And that was like big news, that it was a beta that anybody could go sign up for. Before then, when a beta came out, a pre-release, you would go like apply to be part of the program, you'd sign an NDA, they'd only accept a certain number of people. And most software wasn't free back then, it was stuff people sold, so like they didn't want to give you a copy of it, and they only wanted to give it to people that were really going to buy something. And so I was a poor college kid. I was, had a computer my parents had bought me. I wanted to run a web server and other things like that. This was also before hosting or SaaS or anything like that. So if you wanted to run a website, you had to run a program on your computer and then leave your computer plugged into the internet all the time. That's something you probably never think of doing today, but that was how you ran a web server. And a lot of people, that was like hooked up to a dial-up modem that was connected all the time. It was so cool going to college. It was like we had Ethernet and you could just plug it into the wall and leave it on. But you still had to go run this thing and leave it running all the time. If it crashed, your website went down. So I was a fan of Macs at the time. There was a web server for the Mac called WebStar, and it cost $500 or $600. So I couldn't afford to buy that. So the only way I had any chance of getting it was to go apply for the beta program. So I go and I fill out the form to apply for the beta program, and at the time that I'm filling it out, there was another product right next to it called ListStar. And I had no idea what that was, but it was just as easy when I was filling out one to basically fill out the other one too. So I just filled out the other form too. And everybody wanted the web server. That was like everybody wanted to run a website. This was like when the first websites were going up. So I have very little to value add to that. I was a college kid. I was never going to go buy the software. So they did not let me into the beta program for the web server software. But apparently not that many people were applying for the beta program for the list software, for the email software, and so they let me into that. And so I get into this beta program, and I get this box in the mail because software came in boxes back then. And then it showed up, and I read the manual because I was probably the only one that read the manual. I was a college kid. I had more time than money, so I actually read the manual and like knew what this thing did, and found I had this email server. It was back then, the most popular email servers were Listserv and Majordomo, which you're into Unix stuff, you may be familiar with or may have heard of. These days, you go to Yahoo Groups or Facebook Group or Google Groups or something like that. But this was a new product in that space, and what was really interesting about it was it ran on a Mac, and it had a visual kind of flowchart type interface for configuring it instead of command line text type code. And so read the manual, started playing with it, set it up, ran it on my computer, created a list. Nobody was on the list, and basically just tried to like learn about the software. So they had an online forum. It was like an email list itself where people talked about the product. It was everybody in the beta program. These days, they might do an email list. They might just do like a Facebook group or like something like that for people to chat. But it was just this group where people who were installing the software would go use it. And so people would post questions, and I actually knew a bunch of the answers because I was the only one that had read the manual. So I would answer people's questions on this thing the way you might answer questions on social media today or on Facebook or on Twitter or something like that. And so I started answering a bunch of these people's questions on the forum. And then this is a fairly small company, maybe 30 or 40 people. The CEO of the company at some point emailed me and was like, hey, you're answering all these questions. It seems really helpful. He figured out by that point I was a college kid. He's like, why don't we make you an intern? And like you can, we'll pay you to answer the questions. And you can do that for us. And he knew what I wanted to do was code stuff. So he's like, in your extra time, you can code add-ons and other stuff for our software. So I take this job and I start answering all these questions on the forum. And then one day, this software, kind of like if you had your MacBook or Apple Mail, and you had some suggestion for Apple Mail, like good luck, like you don't really have any expectation you're going to go email Apple and they're going to change the software for you, right? Like it's like this was kind of like that. Like they didn't go change the software for people; they had it and you could go use it. And so people would call in and they wanted to do one thing differently or another thing differently, and the salespeople they would talk to wanted to close the deal, so they wanted to be able to make the customer happy, but the company didn't really do any of that. And so one day, one of the salespeople had this bright idea, and they were like, hey, we don't do that, but we've got this college kid that works for us, and I bet if you buy him some pizza, he will probably do that for you. And so they introduced me to this other person, and this person writes to me, and they're like, hey, they just wanted me to write a script or something that was going to customize the way it worked. And I knew how to do that kind of stuff, so I was like, hey, great, I'll do that. And they bought me some pizza, and it was awesome. I ate that night. And so that was really great for the salespeople, right? Because I was now a sales tool to like help them sell stuff. And so they start sending me more of those. And suddenly I now get this little kind of consulting business where I'm like, getting paid 20 for this software. And that was pretty good money when I was, a sophomore in college. And I was pretty psyched. I thought that was pretty great. And so now I'm like doing this consulting work, and I'm running my own little list, my own little server. And by then I maybe have got some people using it. I actually created an email list for the people that use email lists, because that was the only people I had to talk to. So I had in my world, a pretty influential group of people using this list on my server, and I would consult people about how to fix theirs. And then one day, one of my customers called me up and he said, "Hey Josh, every time my server goes down, it's this huge pain in the ass. Like my server stops working, and that means my people on the list can't send each other messages, and like they notice it's down, and then I call you and I pay you $50 and you log in and you always seem to be able to fix it right away, but I just don't want it to go down." And he's like, "Josh, I know you run a server and yours probably goes down, but I never notice it because you're like in college and you're sitting there watching it all the time. And you seem to be able to like keep, from my perspective, it never goes down. I'm sure it does, but you fix it right away. So instead of me like urgently calling you every time my server crashes and having you come fix it and having it be a big problem, how about I just pay you $50 a month and you run it on your server and you just take care of it?" And that may sound like the way everyone would do everything today, but that was like a completely revolutionary idea. There was no hosting, there was no SaaS, there was nothing like that. So this was like a totally foreign concept. For me, I was thinking, this is great. Like, one, I didn't buy this computer. I don't pay for this internet connection. Like, I'm optimistically assuming nothing's ever going to go wrong. So this is like free $50 a month. This is like beer money. This is, this is great. So I'm thinking, this is awesome. I'm going to get paid $50 a month. I'm not going to do anything. And that was my first hosting client. And so then that was a pretty good deal. So I started trying to get more of those. As I would do these consulting gigs, I would say, "Hey, by the way, I host email lists." And then I put a little thing in my signature at the bottom of my email, like, "Hey, by the way, I host email lists too." And then I started answering more people's questions, just like kind of like, again, very much like you would do on social media today. So I just started going on all these email lists and answering everybody's questions, just helping them. And then at some point they would ask me for help with something, and I'd be like, "Well, that's going to be a lot of work, actually. I do some consulting work, or I could host it for you, and I could like convert them into customers." And so that was the beginning of my first business. It was called Skylist. It had a funny name why it was called Skylist. The CEO of the other company that had hired me eventually sold that business, and was then kind of doing some work on the side. And when I realized this was becoming a real business, I wanted to go incorporate and create a company, but I was pretty intimidated about that. I'd never done that before. Very unwarranted. It was really no big deal, but I, in my head, made it out to be a big deal. And so I wanted my company to be like a subsidiary of his company instead of having to go do it on my own. And so his company had a really funny name. It was called Skyware. And so I just riffed off the Sky name and made it Skylist because we were hosting lists, and that was Skylist. And then maybe 6 or 9 months later, I realized that there was no reason for me to be part of his company at all, and just spun it out into being its own thing. But that was the beginning of Skylist. And so I started that, again, that was my sophomore year of college, and was able to just incrementally grow it until I graduated, to the point where when I graduated from college, I had 2 or 3 of my friends working for me part-time, someone doing tech support, somebody else doing some consulting work. I was making a couple $100,000 a year. As far as business goes today, looking back at that, I don't think of that as much of a business. The businesses we try to build here are a lot bigger than that. But man, I thought I was hot shit as a college kid. I was like the richest college kid around. I could buy a keg every weekend. Like it was pretty awesome. And I really thought I was just going to keep doing that. I was like, this is great. I'm going to graduate, and then I just it'll be just like it was before, except I won't have to go to school. And I'm going to still live in my fraternity house. I'm going to this is going to be the greatest thing in the world. But that was 1999, which was like the peak of the first .com boom. And right around that time, a bunch of my other friends had come down here to Austin to work with Joe Lehman at Trilogy Software, and they convinced me to come down and do that, and that's what brought me to Austin. But that's a story of starting my first company, and the reason I start with that, and I think it's relevant, is just that some people have really great eureka moments and big ideas, and they think up great things, and all the power to them. I think that's pretty awesome. Most of the people I know stumble into things like that. I don't think I just got lucky. I was doing a whole bunch of the right things to make sure I stumbled into something. And I mean, even before I had a company, I was working my ass off. I didn't know what I was working on, but I was doing lots of stuff, and I was learning about lots of things, and I was talking to lots of people, and I was being exposed to a lot of things, and that put me in the position to find that opportunity to go start that company. And that's kind of the gist of what I recommend. So the theme of this is how to starting a company. And so I've got some suggestions on that. I've got some very specific kind of aspirational 3 or 4 things, the real core stuff you should do. And then I've got kind of a top 10 list of some other things to keep in mind if you're starting a company today. So the first one is to create your own luck with hard work. And this I definitely think I did at the time. I knew I wanted to be involved in a company. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know much about anything. So I tried to learn about everything, right? And I think that was a great time to do it in 1994 and 95 when the internet was really kind of booming up all around us. I think it's just as much today. One of the great things about the internet and being involved with that is that you can go teach yourself so many different things. Almost all the cutting edge stuff happening on the internet, people are teaching themselves it. The people doing it are teaching it to themselves. Like that's the only way it happens. There's nowhere to go take a course on it. And so you can go do that too. So working hard on something, learning a lot about something is a really good start. And it's much better to pick something and to go focus on something than to sit around waiting for the right thing. Because you can just spend a lot of time procrastinating and not ever really get to that. Kicked me off again. Well, I think it'll come back in a second and I'll pop you back on here. The second thing is to learn a lot about something. These things go hand in hand. So part of working really hard is you work really hard learning a lot about something. And again, it's probably more important that you just pick something and learn a lot about something than then you spend a ton of time trying to decide what the best thing is to learn a lot of things about. And in doing that, in going and learning about a bunch of things, you might decide to go learn about something else. You might change your mind, and that's okay. But learn through activity. The activity is really good, and the activity breeds other opportunities. And so, again, the first thing was, work really hard at something, and the next thing is learn a lot about something, and they go hand in hand. So pick something to focus on, pick something to be passionate about, and dive in, really spend a lot of time on it. And then the last thing is to meet somebody new every day. And you can do that a lot of different ways. You can do that by coming to meetups like this. You can do that by inviting people out to lunch. You can do that by hanging out at coffee shops. But meet new people, meet lots of new people, and talk to them about the things you're learning and the things that you're doing. And that may sound really simple, those 3 things, but I really think that's the crux of it. I think if you're not sure where to start, this is how you create your own luck. This is how you create your own activity. You need to be active in doing things and not sitting around kind of wondering what the thing is to do or kind of prognosticating about what all the possibilities could be. So those are really high level. Here are some more very specific suggestions. Actually, before I do that, any questions about that? Actually, I'm still working on getting this out the right way, but I've learned that's the wrong question to ask. Somebody asked me a question about that.
How many companies did you start after that?
How many after that? So this is a funny thing. When people ask you about how many companies you've created, there's usually a trick to it. What they're really asking is how many successful companies you've created. Or that's usually the answer you get. So people focus on I made this one and this one and this one. And so for that answer, it's probably, I put it at about 5. I know I was a Skylist and another email company called Unsub Central. After I sold those, I did Other Inbox, which is my last company. And then I was also very involved early on at Bizarre Voice. My team kind of helped build the first beta version of that. And then WP Engine, which is an awesome company that's growing really right now. And Pingboard is probably the latest one, which is a social company directory that's also working out here. And then there were a lot of ones that didn't work. I remember around my sophomore year of college, when I just started the hosting business, there was one summer where I tried to make really just an add-on to the other software. And so this is a lesson about having a big enough market and other things like that. This really wasn't going anywhere. But it was really just an add-on to the email software. It gave it some functionality to have default headers and footers and other things it didn't normally have. And I remember at the beginning of the summer saying to my friends that I had this goal that I was going to make $100,000 that summer. selling, $100,000 versions of this software. I'm not sure if I sold one of them, but I was very intentional about trying to do it, right, and trying to set some of those milestones and goals and think about it. And there were certainly a bunch of ideas that didn't work out along the way too.
So when you say meet someone new every day, I assume you had some kind of goals and objectives behind that meeting and what you might accomplish out of that. What would they be typically?
Well, when I was doing it to start, it was totally by accident. I had no plan or intention. This is all beautiful hindsight where I can look back and say, look what I did, you should do that. So I don't think I was intentional about it, but I'm a pretty good networker. I like meeting different people. I tend to be really opportunistic. I don't have like a huge plan about it. The big thing I would say is just don't be afraid to reach out to anybody. You'd be amazed how many people will respond or will take meetings with you, and if you can find the right way to contact them or to reach out with them. Anything else? Okay, so here are the more actionable ones. Fine print on this, first of all, is that these now suggestions are what I would do if I was starting a company right now. It's not necessarily what you should do, but it's pretty much impossible to give like a generic answer that would be good for everybody. So I can tell you this is what I would do. I can tell you why I would do this, but you need to figure out if it's what you should do. So the first thing is if I was going to do a startup right now and I could pick anything and start from scratch, I would pick some problem that I personally have. You can do lots of different things, but I think it's a lot more interesting and fun to work on something that's going to affect your own life that you can use every day. It's a lot easier to be passionate about that, to stick with it, to be excited about it, and to kind of give it all the things that being a startup and being an entrepreneur takes. My first company, Skyless, wasn't a problem that I had. Like I didn't know anything about. I wasn't emailing customers. I didn't have any of those things. I didn't use that. And honestly, there's probably like a good 7 or 8 years of denial of like me kind of thinking I was always looking for some other startup because that wasn't the thing that was so exciting to me. Until I realized it was actually becoming a big company. It was really interesting and was going to be really exciting to me. But I would pick something out personally. Like today, I have to email people all the time. Like today, the company I did first is much more of an interesting problem to me because part of running Capital Factory and doing the other things is I have big email lists and I'm managing lots of that stuff. But I would pick some problem that affects you, something that you're going to be able to use every day, and that's going to make your own life or your family's life better. The second thing is I would find some awesome co-founders, or awesome, depending on how you want to spell it. And I did it with my first few businesses. My first few businesses I was a solo founder of. Although even saying that, I know there were people that probably should have been called co-founders that were very, very helpful and instrumental in getting it going. But I think a lot of people get this feeling of like, oh, it would just be easier to do it by myself because it's really hard to find a co-founder. It's really hard to decide to trust somebody or to learn to work with somebody else. But doing a startup is really fucking hard, like in all kinds of ways. It's really hard as like emotionally. It's quite a roller coaster. You have really good days and bad days, and having somebody else that's really in it just like you can really help to help you get through that. And it's hard in that it requires like a ton of different skills, a lot of different skill sets. And as much as like you're probably really awesome, it's hard to imagine that you can do everything and that there's not somebody that would complement you to do some of those other things better or to take it off your plate. So I'd really recommend having a co-founder. I'd also recommend having a connection that doesn't go out all the time. I would bootstrap at the beginning. Austin's really a bootstrap kind of town. It's not the only way to do things. It doesn't work for every kind of business, but I really like the kinds of businesses that you can bootstrap to start, and I like the feeling of bootstrapping a company. Bootstrapping a business is not necessarily going out and raising a whole bunch of money first and and kind of thinking that you have the perfect path or the perfect plan, but really finding a way to kind of start something from nothing. And there's a bunch of things that go with this, but for me, it's really that I really feel good about running these kinds of businesses. That when I've raised money and gotten gotten ahead of myself a bit, there's a lot of pressure that comes with raising money and a lot of feeling of like you're kind of lining things up, or they have to happen a certain way, or things will kind of blow up and explode. And when you bootstrap a business, you're generally like, doing things because there's somebody ready to pay for it like the whole time, and you work off cash flow that you have, and you don't get nearly as overextended, and there's something really great about that. it can go different ways. And some bootstrap businesses become really, really big businesses. Some that might slow you down or hold you back. Today, I find that there's actually somewhat of a hybrid that's very popular and very common, where you start out bootstrapping and you use that to get to product market fit, where you can bootstrap to, I've got something that I understand and is real, and then go raise money for that, really to scale that business, to go grow it. And I think that's a really good fit that makes a lot of sense. So one of the best ways to bootstrap a business is through crowdfunding. This is something that I did with Skylist. We didn't have a word for it. We didn't know to call it crowdfunding. But with Skylist, I was a bootstrap business. I was a college kid. I was basically building my business on my credit cards. And we would sign up a new customer, and we would need to go set up a server for them. And so I would need to buy a computer. I would have to go buy the software that we needed to run for them, and kind of go set it all up. And it cost a couple $1,000s. Now, none of my competitors charged a setup fee, but I had no way to do this without charging a setup fee. So we had to charge a setup fee, and it was always a couple $1,000s up front to go get your stuff set up. And you had to pay us before we would start, because we couldn't start otherwise. And on the one hand, people didn't like that. On the other hand, it kind of made us look good. Like, it made us look like we could, we were higher end, or we could kind of demand more, or things like that. And so we would get all of our customers basically to pay us in advance before we go set up their servers. Now these days, there's much better networks and tools to go help with that, like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and lots of other things. And so again, this won't work for every type of business, but it's a great tool, and it can really both help you to bootstrap, help you to get early revenue to go fund the growth of that business. And even if you plan on going and raising money, it's a great way to validate your business, and the investors will like seeing that you had a successful crowdfunding campaign that shows them that people really want it and are really interested in it. So that's an incredible tool that I would really try to take advantage of. I would talk to everyone about my idea. I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this instinct that they need to limit who they talk to, that they should be quiet about it. They're afraid someone's going to steal their idea. And I just find that is exactly the wrong attitude for most businesses. If you have some deep intellectual property you've spent a lot of money developing that you need to protect, that's great. You don't have to tell everybody, you don't have to give away Coca-Cola's secret formula, but you can tell them you're making a soft drink. Right, and that it's red, and that here's what it tastes like. I would talk to everybody about my idea. I find there's all these mythical things that could go wrong if you tell people about your idea, where they might steal it or they might do something else. And then there's all these things I know of that go right, where they introduce you to good people and give you good advice and connect you with other people, or end up working with you, or all these kind of great things that can come out of it. And in working with 1,000 companies, maybe once or twice I've seen something bad happen, but almost all the time it's all the good things that happen. So I really encourage you to talk to as many people as possible. You're going to get way more good things coming out of it than bad. And most people would argue that if you can't talk about your idea, then it's not really your idea. That if just talking about it would make it easy for someone to go steal it and compete with you, then you're probably not the right person to go do that. That someone else is going to still do that as soon as you launch it, and things like that. So I talked to as many people as I could. I would focus on mobile first. So this is, whatever you're doing, I would figure out what the mobile version of it is and how to build the mobile version, how do people use it on mobile. Mobile is, it's a bunch of reasons. It's really about being in a growing market and being in a place where people have attention and focus. If you do something mobile, it's going to be easier to get investors interested in it, because their investors just more interested in mobile. They're expecting that. If you do something that's mobile, it'll be easier to get people to work on it, to get people to work for you, because it's more exciting to work on something that's mobile right now. If you do something that's mobile, it'll be easier to get press about it, because the press want to cover stuff that's mobile. It'll get easier to get users to try it, because users are expecting to go try lots of new mobile things versus like downloading, installing something on their computer. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why it would just be easier. So if I could pick where I was going to start, I would pick to start on the mobile thing. If I was building something that could have a bunch of different versions, I'd probably try to build the mobile version first. This is other great user interface effect of mobile, that the limited screen size forces you to focus on the things that really matter. Like, you can't put all the buttons on the page. And that's actually also a really good design constraint that makes you figure out what are the 3 buttons that really, really matter. hope I don't have to tell this to this crowd or too many people these days, but I would put everything in the cloud. I wouldn't own any servers like I did with my first company. You don't want to deal with any of that. Part of this is just focusing on the things that matter to you and that you can make a difference on. And so that's probably not changing hard drives or making sure the AC is working or anything like that. So I put everything in the cloud that I could. And kind of working with that, I would outsource as much as I could to other people and to APIs, to other services that can go do things for me. So when you think about your business, there's certain things about your business that make your business unique, that are your special sauce. You should not outsource those things. Those are the things you should own and really take charge of. And then there are other things that probably any other business like yours would have the same kind of thing. And if it's like that, then that's a good thing to outsource. So like I often outsource my accounting, my bookkeeping, because that's not something that's different in my business than some other business. That's something that somebody else can go do pretty well. Certain types of businesses might have a website where you sell stuff. And if it's just like a shopping cart, like any other website with a shopping cart, then you probably would go use some shopping cart software. And you probably would have just a designer to go build that. You don't have to make it your special sauce. If your app is an app that's like many other apps out there, and maybe it has a map on it, or it has a button to buy something or something like that, you could outsource that. But if your app is what sets you apart, if you're a consumer experience or a game or something like that, and you're something where it's all about the app is what makes you different, then you shouldn't outsource that. Then you should try to find that talent in-house and make that something you own and you're really core for. Same thing with your website. If your website's what sets you apart, don't outsource it. Then you should build it. If your website's kind of like everybody else's website, then outsource it. I would write the back end in Ruby on Rails. I think there are lots of good programming languages. Python's a great language. JavaScript, which was really a complete joke when I started my first company in 1995. No one would ever believe you if you said JavaScript was going to become like one of the preferred programming languages. That would have been like the biggest joke in the world. But it is now actually pretty awesome. But I really like Ruby on Rails. I like it because for a couple different reasons. I like the framework itself. I think it encourages a great balance of focusing on quality of what you build and having it be maintainable, and also kind of like the efficiency of being able to build it quickly and get it out to market quickly. So there's a great balance there. I think the types of people that are attracted to this, the types of people that choose to program in Ruby on Rails, have a lot of those same values and tend to get startups. And there's a lot of existing code out there. There's huge libraries of code so that if you go to build something, you don't have to rebuild everything. A lot of the things you need to do, somebody already wrote it. You can already go get it. So having a really big community around it is really helpful in making it easy to maintain and hire new people and things like that. Like I said, Python, probably right up there with it. JavaScript, also great. A bad programmer can build bad software in just about any programming language. And a good programmer can build good software in just about any programming language. So like this isn't going to be what makes or breaks you. Most people don't get to choose this. Most people have a programmer and they know how to program one thing, and that's the thing they go build it in. So that's kind of the practicality of it. But if I could pick, I'd pick Ruby on Rails still today. Not too many more of these. I would surround myself with other entrepreneurs. That's this room we're in right now during a hackathon. But I would work at a co-working space. I work at a coffee shop. I go be around other entrepreneurs, particularly at the beginning. I think you get a lot of benefit from that. One, kind of like the co-founder thing. They're going to energize you. They're going to help keep you going through some of these really tough times. They're going to be able to give you feedback. They're going to introduce you to people that'll help you. They'll help you with hiring people and other things like that. So being around other people is really awesome and really helpful in doing it. There are now so many places like Capital Factory, like co-working spaces and coffee shops where people hang out and things like that really didn't exist 10 years ago. And so I'd surround yourself with other entrepreneurs. At some point you outgrow it. Like when you've kind of like really got it dialed in and you know what you need to do, then you kind of like don't want any distractions. It's like, just leave me alone, let me go run as fast as I can. But at the beginning, I would surround myself with other entrepreneurs. So those are the tips. If you are interested in this kind of stuff, I do a talk every Tuesday at 4:30. So the first Tuesday, it's about how to do fundraising. This next Tuesday, it's about the incubator here at Capital Factory. The next one, the third Tuesday, it's intro to the Austin startup scene. We've been doing that on Mondays, but we're now switching that to the third Tuesday. That's all about just how to plug into the startup scene. And then the fourth one is about how to get started with angel investing. So those kind of go into more depth on a lot of these areas. With that, we'd love to open it up to Q&A, and you can ask me anything. There are some sample questions if you need spurring, but anything you want, I'm happy to answer questions.
Is it all about tech startups, or you guys support all kinds of stuff?
Capital Factory? We're really focused on tech and internet startups. Our broad view is that tech and internet is infiltrating everything. That if it's not part of that industry now, it will be really soon. So we think of that really broadly. We've got a company here building a car. We've got companies doing things in healthcare and health IT and in energy and in education and lots of different spaces. But everything touches software and internet in some way. In particular, those types of businesses are very scalable businesses. So they're ones that we know can grow to be really big. And that tends to be what we focus on. There are other groups in Austin that focus on other types of companies, like Incubation Station does consumer packaged goods, granola bars and energy drinks and things where you need distribution through grocery stores and places like that. There's things focused on kind of other spaces and topics, but we're all software and internet.
So on your slide where you said you should talk to everyone about your idea and things almost never go bad except for this 1 or 2 times, can you talk a little bit about those, like the kind of things that could go bad and how you might avoid that happening?
So I mean, it's really hard to come up with them. I have to really stretch. Like the most prominent example is like the Winklevosses and Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg stealing Facebook from the Winklevosses. But even when you look at that example, you look at it and you go like, oh, the Winklevosses were never going to go do this on their own anyway. He didn't really steal. At some level, he didn't really steal it from them. Like they didn't really have it. So that's kind of the classic example. It's like, oh, someone's going to steal my idea. About the only thing I've really heard of, and this has happened once fairly recently, and maybe it happened one other time, is, I don't want to scare you off this, but somebody inquired about investing in a company, and then ended up going and creating a company that was competitive. And even that is like, one, I don't know how you avoid that because you got to talk to investors, and if you're talking to investors, you got to tell them what you do, and no investor is going to sign something that says that a non-compete or a or any kind of thing like that. So it's just like you got to talk to investors, and you got to talk to people, and it's possible that they could do something like that. So if you have the luxury of having lots of choices about who you talk to, and you know everybody, and then you can only talk to people that are great investors that have a great reputation. But most people don't have that luxury. Most people just have to talk to anybody they can go talk to, and so I don't know what else you could do to avoid that. It's like. But that's one risk is, you're going to go talk about your business and maybe they'll go do something competitive. And because they were an investor and they were getting, they at least got the benefit of hearing this company's whole pitch. They saw more than what you could see on the website. So maybe theoretically they got some information that helped them go copy them or compete against them better or something like that. I don't think that actually happened because I don't think that company's doing very well. Yeah, the copycat one. But that's, that's going to be the trade-off is like, it's either they're going to steal my idea, they're going to steal my people. That would be another one. These are all things you have to worry about anyway. And it's like, and if even the secrecy part only lasts really as long as until you launch the company, and then it's like you got to go into market, and that time you got to try to tell everyone about it so people use it. So it's pretty hard to avoid those things. But the types of problems you see would be, hey, this person stole my idea. And people seem to think that having the idea is like the really important part, and that by having the idea, they have some ownership of it, and that nobody should be able to go copy it, and that's just not the way the world works. So that's another reason why I don't worry too much about that.
So basically the answer is execute.
Yeah, like you gotta execute better, you gotta move faster, like you gotta make, I know somebody working on a stealth company in Austin right now, and it's a very experienced entrepreneur. They understand the space they're in really well. They're going against some really big competitors that are some of the biggest companies in the world, and they filed for a patent. And so, one, because of the patent, they have to be careful who they disclose it to until the patent's awarded, because that for them affects the patent in some way. And then two, they know that as soon as they launch it, the other companies are going to know about it and be able to try to copy them, but they're trying to get as much headway on them as they can. And so, in their case, I think it does kind of make sense, but most of the time it doesn't. You're next.
So Two-part question. Have you seen the movie A Flash of Genius?
I have not.
Oh, okay, you should. I've seen it like 5 times. I'm mesmerized by it. But the guy that invented the intermittent windshield wiper, check it out on.
His grandson was at Trilogy with me when I came here in '96. I know him telling that
Is
story.
there any? I have 4, 5 things that I need to apply for patents on, but I have a lot of friends that are traps and a lot of inventors that I've dealt with. And I'm trying to figure that, so during the patent process, you really have to have all your ducks in a row, because once you, what is the dangers in applying for your patent and getting your stuff patented? So there's a window of opportunity before it's accepted that.
Probably dying of old age, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, probably. So can you talk about that just a moment?
Yeah, I don't think there's a ton of risk in filing for a patent.
As long as you don't talk to anyone about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's not the concern I normally hear. The bigger issues generally would just be, is it worth my time at all? With most of the companies that we work with, the innovation cycle is so fast, it's faster than the patent cycle. So many of the companies that we work with, whatever they're doing now, it will be obsolete in 3 years. Whatever they're doing, if they're still in business, they will be doing something else. It will be, evolved, changed in a significant way such that the patent probably wouldn't be that applicable. Patents on software, people have different feelings about, but generally, they're harder. It's a little more vague, a little bit harder to enforce, or harder to know what's going to happen. And so it's easy to spend a lot of time and money going and filing that patent, and it's both money that you don't necessarily have early on, and it takes time of your key people, right? It's going to be the people that whoever invented the patent and can document it is probably the people whose time is most valuable in your company.
Sure.
And so, should they be spending 40 hours writing the patent, or should they be spending that time, making the product better or doing something else? That's the tough call, I think, a lot of times. There's times when it can be helpful, it's very unlikely as a small company you're going to go sue a big company over a patent. It might be helpful, like when, you might get more money for the company when they go to buy it, if they were to buy it from you. Or you might, it may become helpful strategically at some point if somebody threatens you with a patent for you to be able to say, well, I have a patent too, you're infringing on my patent. And so there's ways it can be helpful, but it's hard. Most of the companies we work with, it's not very useful for them.
Okay.
And I would also just think about how much time and money did you invest in building it? Patents are good for things where you invested a lot of time and money. That's what they're made for, in my opinion. Not if it's something like you just thought up overnight, it's probably not a really good fit for a patent. Back.
So this is inspired kind of by that last question. But have you played at all with the reviews in your box that Google has?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on it as far as changing the game, how emails use the interface?
Yeah, so I was actually I was just out at Mountain View in California last week, where I put on an email conference once a year, and Google was there talking about Inbox, and I've got it on my phone. I actually am not that excited about that particular product. I think it might be very good. It might be very successful for them. I could see a lot of people using it. When I look at it, there's nothing actually new in Inbox. They've pulled together a whole bunch of things that were already happening in other places, either through Google or through other people. It's like a combination of kind of the snooze button and labeling and organizing things, and then a little bit more of a visual display, and all these pieces were already there, and they kind of pulled it all together into one. So that might make a better experience. Their target market with that is not the people that are hardcore Gmail users. It's more of a little bit more casual audience that so they're not trying to make that thing that replaces Gmail. They almost see them as two different things. And I think it'll probably be successful at that. But there's nothing in there that I'm like, oh man, that's so awesome. This is so game changing. This is so new. I don't see it that way.
So we've learned a lot about what you've learned from your successes. What would you say is one thing that you've learned from your failure?
I think certainly lots of things. I think first of all, just realizing that people are good at different things, and so through having failures and going through different things, realizing what things I'm not good at and where other people compliment me really well. I'm definitely I break things, and I'm like a rainmaker. I create opportunity. I I kind of need somebody running around behind me cleaning stuff up and like making sure all the things we did actually happen. And I see how that complements me pretty well. I'm not really finance oriented, and you know that's usually a really good component of any kind of business. So I see, you know, I just see other places where people complement me really well. Certainly learning like not to let paperwork get ahead of you. You know, like just, you know, putting off the paperwork and the details can catch up to you, or suddenly it's a lot of work and there's a lot of it, and it's really usually something you should stay on top of, making sure that all your agreements get signed with your employees, and you've got confidentiality agreements for all of them, and they've gone through the proper paperwork, and like those kinds of things are a lot harder to clean up after than to just do right the first time.
My question is, I guess, finding developers or tech talent is challenging, but finding a tech co-founder, for us at least, we're looking for someone, and it's difficult to find that. Do you have any advice on how can you find maybe a tech co-founder, not just a developer that's working on one product in the company?
Yeah, so kind of a lot of people ask me about finding a co-founder. That's a really common thing that comes up. I think there's no perfect way to do this. This is kind of like dating. It's like, how do I find a wife? Like, you know, there's lots of ways to go do that, but there's no book on how to go do it. And actually, the process is very analogous to like a dating process too. For me, I think the best ways to find a co-founder, first of all, is to go where those people are. So, you know, there's all these meetups and events where the types of people you want to meet are hanging out. And even if that event itself, the topic doesn't interest you, going and being around it, seeing who there talks and who looks smart and what they're doing. After the Ruby on Rails meetup, they all go to a bar afterwards. It's probably more important that you go to the bar after than that you go to the actual meetup. But like going there and like meeting those people and talking to them. Second, I'm a huge fan of hackathons, in particular like the 3-day lock-ins, like 3-day startup and startup weekend and things like that. I think those are amazing tools. To me, the most valuable thing those are good for is for finding a co-founder. I don't think that many real companies get built out of it. I still think it's a great experience. But the most valuable thing is putting yourself into an artificial situation with a bunch of other people who are kind of at that same point, because if they're going to a 3-day startup or a startup weekend, they probably are the kind of person that's looking to join a company or be part of something. And putting yourself, there's artificial time pressure, so you get to see how people really perform, like who stays up all night and really gets shit done and who doesn't, and you get to see how you work with them under pressure and under those situations. And then by the end of the weekend, maybe you're on a team with 4 or 5 people, but there probably were 40 or 50 people there, and you know of all those people who the badasses are, and like, you know, who you want to go follow up and work with, and they know that about you. You know, like you get to kind of see each other perform. So I think that's an incredible resource for finding those kinds of people, and I would go to lots of those and participate in them. You know, it reminds me of one of the questions that I put on here: how can I convince amazing talent to join my startup? And I think you know, the real thing there is I think the most about who would the best person for your startup be. And that's not easy. That's hard. You know, the answer's not like, it's not like Steve Jobs or like, you know, something like that. But like, who would this be such a perfect fit for that they'd be crazy not to go do it, right? And finding someone that's really passionate about what you're doing or has really relevant experience. And sometimes that might be, not necessarily in the case of the technical co-founder, but possibly, that might be someone that's really senior at one of your biggest competitors, at like a really big company. Because that really big company, while you may look at it and go like, oh, they probably get paid a lot of money and they're at this big company, they probably look at it like, I'm stuck in this big company and like there's no more growth from here, and where do I go? And there's all these people telling me what to do, I don't have any say. And like, it can be really attractive to go join a startup, both from having a big impact as well as having a lot of financial opportunity. And so with the right opportunity, they're gonna look at it and go, wow, I could really rock that company's world. I can make a huge difference there. I wanna go join that, because I'm going to be so perfect for that, because I'm going to do so well there. And so really thinking about that, about like who would the best kind of person be, I think it's way easier to convince that person to join your company than just anybody else.
You seem to have a pattern with your company sale to entrepreneur.
I hope that's my pattern. I wish that would be a good pattern, but
is that your game?
create the sale, not create something big?
Yeah, lots of people do different types of things. You look at some people that were very successful and they, worked on one company their whole life, and lots of other people feel like they can only have one big success. And honestly, I don't think I've had any big successes. Like most of my companies have been fairly small companies. So maybe I've still got mine out there. But I also learned about myself just like what I'm good at and what I like. And I like the whiteboard. I like the brainstorming, the beginning of the company, like figuring it out. In many ways, I often use this example with Heather Bruner, who's right now the CEO of WP Engine, which I'm on the board of, and so I work really closely with her there. And I love Heather, I have so much respect for her, but it's very unlikely we will ever work at the same company together. And it's because I get super excited about the company at the beginning, and I get bored right about the time the sale becomes repeatable. So it's like I love figuring out the product and going and closing the first deals and being part of all that. And when that starts to become okay, we know how to sell it, I get kind of bored and I want to go make something new and go figure something else new out. And then there's other people like Heather who thinks it's boring when there's nothing to sell. Right? She's like, there's nothing here. You guys there's nothing for me to work with. And then right when the sale starts to get repeatable, she's like, okay, I got something I can work with here. I know how to grow this and scale it and build a team around it. And there's something real here, and now it's exciting to her, right? And I don't want to put her in a bucket or anything. I'm sure she could do lots of different things. But I think we find ourselves over the course of now, 10 or 15 years of seeing each other at different companies, that's where it goes. Some company's about to blow up and be amazing when Heather joins. That's a really good indicator that company's about to blow up. And maybe it is when I leave. So it's just figuring out where you're at. So for me, I love the early stages of it. Maybe I'll find some company someday that I want to scale and grow past that. When I had 60 people working for me, I didn't really like it. I don't want to manage 60 people.
Follow when you sell your company, what's the process? How do you go about doing that? You put a for sale sign, somebody.
Yeah, that's really different for lots of companies. Ideally, you want to get bought, not be sold. So ideally, you don't want to put up a for sale sign because it's also kind of like the dating thing. The positioning from the beginning is really important, whether they're coming to try to buy you or you're trying to sell it. If you're if you're a really hot commodity, then you can go kind of put it on the market, hire an investment banker, shop it around, lots of people, try to get them bidding on it. And so it's possible to have a good outcome where you decide to be for sale. I know some great entrepreneurs right now here in Austin, who I can't mention, who, a lot of times sometimes where that will happen is someone will come offer to buy you, and then you'll go oh, wow, I didn't really think about selling it right now. Maybe I should think about selling it right now. And then you go kind of say, okay, it's for sale. You've already kind of got a buyer, but you're like, okay, let's get it out there in front of more people or things like that. And then other times, it happens really fast. With my company, my first company, it was so silly. One of my biggest customers raised a bunch of money, $60 million, and I was on IM with them, and I was like, hey, congrats on raising all the money, and they're like, yeah, that's awesome. And I was like, kind of half joking, I was like, huh, you should buy us now. And they're like, yeah, we should. And then we literally kind of threw out a price over IM. And that anchored the whole deal. That literally became the deal. And it was this, I didn't really even think that was the conversation I was about to have. It was an offhand, hey, you should buy us. So I think it can happen lots of different ways. Yeah. Is there some over here? I'll get all of you, I promise.
Okay, so there are probably some websites that you turn to pretty regularly, and I'm curious about the content there. What draws you to them? What sort of experience do you have with it that has you returning?
What kind of websites do I go to? Is this news, or is this any kind of site?
It can be anything. Just what, of the things that you do repeatedly.
Yeah.
What is the experience you have there that has you coming back to it?
So everything I find through Twitter. That's my one feed to rule them all. And so if I'm interested in a website, I find a way to follow that website on Twitter. If I like a person, I go follow them on Twitter, and then I just watch Twitter or I watch what my friends repost on Twitter, right? So that's my part of the social filtering part of that, is seeing what they put on there. What sites do I go to regularly?
What's the experience that says, I'm gonna follow them, or I want to come back and be aware of what they're doing?
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting, different perspectives or commentary or unique links or information I'm not getting. So like, I really love following Mark Andreessen, founder of Netscape, on Twitter. He's awesome on Twitter. He has really provocative things to say. He highlights other interesting things other people are saying. That's one I regularly am going back to and reading.
What do you think is the biggest barrier you find with people afraid to quit their jobs, and how do you push them through that?
Well, I don't try to actually push anybody to quitting their job. I think it's a little too much responsibility for me. But I look for people that say they want to. Wearing this shirt in New York City is like hilarious. Like walking down the street in New York, I literally get stopped about every 5 feet, like with like some doorman or somebody like, "Hey, dude!" But I think it's just this feeling of like the unknown, right? Like I've got a job and it's paying me well, and maybe I have a family or other things to support, and what's going to happen? I don't know. Like what if I'm not successful? And will I be able to get my job back? And things like that. In many ways, that's one reason. There's different trade-offs. That's one reason I really like the idea of starting a company in college or as a student or right out of school, is because you have nothing to lose. You don't really have a job. You never got paid a lot of money. You don't have a big family support. Like that's a great time to go risk it all, right, and take these other things. Now, depending on what you do, for a lot of technical people, I still think there's almost no risk. I mean, it's like there's such a strong demand for technical talent in the job market that like if you got a tech job at some big company, you could quit your job and go try something for a year and turn around and come back a year later, and you're gonna be able to get a job and be just fine. But I think it's just fear of the unknown. Yeah, it's like anytime you do something for the first time, it's scary. It's actually another reason I love 3-Day Startup and startup weekends and those kinds of things is even though I don't think that most of the time you come out of there with a real company, I think going through the thought process of thinking up a company and trying to validate and seeing what you can build and like having to justify it and getting to the end makes it a lot less intimidating to go do that again. And I think that's a really worthwhile experience to go through that's going to make you more comfortable and getting practiced at that.
I have a sustainable food source that I want to sell in very large quantities all over the world. So you mentioned when you were talking about whether or not a capital factory is, you're talking about being mostly just for startups and techs. So could this help me, because I'm going to have to sell it over the internet, period.
Yeah.
Right, you're really good at doing that.
Yeah, we might, and that's where there might be ways you can help. If you think your primary way you're going to sell it is through a website and online marketing and lead gen and things like that, there might be people that could really help with that. You would also want to check out Incubation Station. They're going to be more focused on traditional distribution channels, and other things like that.
Others besides those two, or?
For that type of business, those are the things that
I want to
really,
live here.
Yeah, those are the things that really stick out. There are a lot of resources to help entrepreneurs in Austin. The intro to the Austin startup scene talk that I mentioned, that one goes into a lot of detail about
It's here, right?
Yeah, that's here, but it's like
that's
once a month.
the Tuesdays that you're talking about?
One of the Tuesdays, yeah. But it goes through here. Here's where all the VCs are, and here are all the incubators.
And which
here are all
one
the
was it again?
Intro to the Austin startup scene.
Okay, thank you.
And the link for that is bit.ly/intro2 Austin.
Okay, thank you.
Any more over here? Way in the back.
So I was thinking about the next step sort of opportunities. I know Christine is a local company that makes a solution for wearables. What is your gut feeling on the time that wearables will be right?
So Pristine is a company here in Capital Factory that does Google Glass for operating rooms and medical situations, training, other things like that. And I think one really interesting thing to note about them, they just recently closed a round of funding with S3 Ventures, which is a company here in Austin, another firm here in Austin too. One interesting thing to note about them is they are not a wearables company. They don't make any wearables, right? So they write software that runs on top of wearable platforms like Google Glass and other ones that are being built like that. And I think those are good businesses for startups. I think it's very challenging for a startup to build a physical wearable product. I think at that point, unless it's a very niche market, if you're trying to produce those at scale, you're now in the consumer electronics business. And that's a hard business with very low margins that involves, that really big companies are really good at. There's a lot of logistics behind it. So I'd be much more excited about software and apps that build on top of these app platforms something designed to use the Apple Watch or to use Google Glass or to build on top of data collection resources and things like that. Because I think that's going to be a much more interesting, exciting market.
Curious what your answer is to the second bullet point.
What's the best way to impress an angel investor? It's an easy one. So it sounds easy. It's easy to say, hard to do. So tell them you're going to do something and then do it. So sounds super easy, actually super hard. Really, really, it's hard for anybody in many situations. It's very hard for a company. It's why public companies have so much trouble hitting their quarterly numbers, and it's even harder for a startup. It's really hard for a startup to predict anything about what's going to happen or where they're going to be a month from now or 2 months from now. And if you can do that, you will instill great confidence in investors. And so coming in and saying, hey, here's where I am, this is what I'm doing. Over the next month, I'm going to deploy this, I'm going to accomplish this, I'm going to talk to this many people, I'm going to test this. And then coming back and saying, hey, remember I met with you a month ago? I said I was going to do this, this, and this? Well, here's what I did, and here's what I learned. That's going to really impress investors.
So that's prior to getting funded.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of the spirit of that question, was like, how do I impress an angel investor so that they invest in my company before they invest? Another thing I would say is, that's really also another really simple one, is be very specific. Use specific numbers and not generalizations. Don't say, you know, I talked to a bunch of people and they all told me this. You say, no, I talked to 42 people and 36 of them told me this. There's no factual difference between saying those two different things, but one sounds way smarter and way better and sounds like you're actually on top of your shit and measuring things and know what you're doing versus these vague kind of references. So I would say, you know, put numbers in what you do. Be very specific. And then just a personal pet peeve, don't ever say about 42.
At what point should you start thinking about getting professional legal advice? And what are some options, like affordable options, I guess, that startups have?
Yeah. So the intro to the Austin Startup Scene talk, just as a reference, goes through and lists a whole bunch of lawyers here in town and who you can go talk to, and that's online as well. And here's another link for that is austinpreneur.com, which is my blog /welcome. If you go to that, you'll see all the intro to the Austin Startup Scene stuff, lists of lawyers and VCs and incubators and all kinds of stuff like that. But you said, when's the right time to get legal help? You know, so someone just asked me today, they said, hey, I've got a new startup idea, I'm going to incorporate a company. Should I go to a real lawyer to do it? Or should I go pay $300 to do the thing online where they form my company? And I said, well, do you plan on raising investment money in the next 6 months to a year? So yeah, I think we're going to raise money in 6 months. So well, then go hire the real lawyer and do it the real way. It'll cost you $2,000 instead of $300, but otherwise you're just wasting money because you're going to have to go redo it later and it'll be a pain in the butt later, and like you should just have it set up to begin with the right way. And that's going to look better to investors and other people. So I would say you should, generally I'd try to have good legal counsel from the beginning. But don't overdo it with them, and you should find ones that get startups and can be very efficient. And so ones that can be very efficient, they know how to form a company for a small, for relatively a small amount of money for a few $1,000s. They're going to have templates for a whole bunch of things you're going to need to use, like your NDAs and your investor agreements and your basic, like a convertible note to raise money on or things like that. So none of those things should cost a lot of money, and many lawyers will defer most of your fees till you raise money. So they might say, hey, they might say, you need to pay our out-of-pocket expenses, like it costs us money to file these forms or things like that, so it's a few $100s for that. We're gonna bill you, but you don't have to pay the bill till you go raise some money. And so you might owe them $5,000, but you actually don't pay it for 6 months or for 4 months or something like that.
The asterisk on that, but an important piece on that, speaking from experience, is if you're going to do a convertible note like that after funding, clause of saying, and if we don't get funding, you waive the note, is a very valuable clause to put in that.
Yeah. I wasn't saying a convertible note, but it would be some kind of a invoice review or something like that. Yeah.
So mostly, entrepreneurs are scared of failure. So how many times you have failed?
Every day. Every day, all the time.
And then how do you get over it?
I mean, I think I have very intentionally tried to train myself not to worry about it. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this or I'm even good at it, but I definitely very intentionally try to reframe my thinking, to challenge assumptions, to be okay with risking things, to be okay with failure. I say the first thing about getting ready with failure is practice it. Like, you get comfortable with it. It becomes less of a big deal. It's like speaking on stage. It's like doing lots of other things. There was this great entrepreneur here at Capital Factory a year ago. Who remember? Was it June? Do you remember? Does anyone know him? He did a thing where he said he was gonna fail every day for like 100 days or something. He was gonna go he had all these different antics and things he would do to get people to tell him no or to fail. And then the fascinating part was the things that he tried to do to fail that didn't fail. You know, or like he would think someone was gonna say no and it would actually work. He ended up getting a bunch of press coverage and other stuff around it. It was really funny. But he was training himself to be comfortable failing and to be comfortable with people saying no. And I think that's a really worthwhile and good thing to do. You know, I have young kids, and I have to work on that with them. And my oldest daughter, who just turned 6 yesterday, I see a lot of myself in her, and she, at this, the stage of where she's at right now, she's like really a perfectionist, and we've had to work with her because she doesn't want to try anything she doesn't know she's going to win. You know, like, she wants to succeed and do well, but she wants to do the things she knows she can go do because she doesn't want to fail. And she doesn't want to speak up in class if she might not be right. She only speaks up if she knows the answer, right? And we're trying to work with her on like, no, that's okay. And we talk to her about being a risk taker and why that's okay. That's a good thing, right? And it's okay to fail. And I'm trying to drill that into her then. But it's, in some ways, I'm just repeating her to the same things I tell myself every day. Other questions?
On your list, you had find a good problem that you can relate to, but you've also talked a lot about opportunities and how you found opportunities. So could you talk a little bit about the sort of how you see the difference between finding opportunity and solving a problem?
Sure. I think that's different for different people. My style is I'm very opportunistic. Like, I don't plan. I have a direction I'm heading, and like people ask me like, "What's your plan for Capital Factory?" Like, I know where we're going and what we're doing, but I don't have this big, long strategic plan. I know it feels right, we're headed in the right direction, and we just scoop up opportunity as it comes and as it comes around us, and that feels right. And if we're working hard and we're in the right position and we've got the right resources around us, then when we get those opportunities, we can act on them and we can take advantage of them. And so that works really well for me. The beginning of that whole thing was around how do I find my passion? How do I find the startup I want to go work on? And that can happen lots of different ways. And so, I said, hey, if everything was ideal and I could pick all these different characteristics, I would make sure it was something that I was passionate, that a problem I had personally, it would be this, and it would be this, and it would be this. It won't be all those things, and so part of it is you have to be opportunistic and find the right thing, right? And if you stumble across that thing and maybe it doesn't check that box, but you can be passionate about it in another way, and it's a really great opportunity for some other reason, or you realize, you just have to go do it. Well, that's okay, that's great. But that's what you're trying to do, is find that thing where it takes you away. And again, that's where it's kind of like falling in love, right? Like, how do you know you're in love? Like, I don't know, you just know, right? Like, well, how do you know it's the right startup? Like, you just know. Is there one more here?
Going back to your tips about starting a company, this may be a tough one for you to answer, but do you think if you were to quit your job, start a company, would you launch in Austin?
Would I launch in Austin? I'm a very biased person to ask that. I think it depends what you're going to go do. If I was starting a film production company, I'm not sure that I would, although it's not a bad place to do that. If I was, there's certainly, I think place is really important, and I think there are certain places that are really good to do certain types of things. I think it's really hard to argue that Silicon Valley is not the best place to go do a tech startup, right? Like I don't know what you could say to like knock that down. You could talk about some trade-offs. You can talk about some things that might be better or worse, but like it's pretty much the best place, right? Now, there's a bunch of reasons why I love being in Austin, and I think there are some different trade-offs to that. And I think personally, I'd much rather be a a big fish in a small pond that's growing than a small fish in a big pond that's shrinking or staying the same size. And I love being part of Austin right now because of all the change, because of all the growth, because you can all be part of that. As that happens, all these opportunities come up, and you can be involved, and you can have a say, and you can be part of the growth that's happening and help shape it. And I think that's a lot harder to do in Silicon Valley or in a lot of other places. And then at the same time, a lot of other places I might be interested in aren't big enough. They don't have enough going on to make it exciting and interesting. And I feel like Austin is just at this perfect spot where it's like big enough to be really exciting and small enough to like feel homey, right? And like everybody, and like it's you're part of something. I use a lot of one of my favorite phrases these days is just right place, right time. People say like, how's it going? How's it going to Capital Factory? I'm like, we are in the right place at the right time. We're in Austin doing entrepreneurship stuff. Like this is the right place and the right time to be doing that. So I think that's what I like about Austin. But I think there's lots of other great places, and I think it's very hard to say you have to do it one place or the other.
Earlier you had mentioned Ruby on Rails. In a nutshell, why that? Why is that the best?
I tried to. Okay, I didn't do a good job before then. That's the nutshell I was trying to get before. But some of the things I'm going to say, you might say, well, Python has that too, or other things, So it's not the only way to go do it. But what I like about it is I think that it's got compared, for example, to JavaScript, which has evolved over time from being a much more loose type language where it allows you to do lots of bad things. Ruby on Rails, I feel like, has the right balance of having enough structure in the language to encourage really good habits and really good behavior and maintainability, and yet still very flexible. And I think the community of types of people that program it, the people that are attracted to learn Ruby on Rails, some of this has changed over the past 10 years, because it used to be this cutting edge, cool new thing, and now it's very, very popular. But the kinds of people that went and taught themselves Ruby on Rails were the kinds of people I wanted to work at my startup. And then if I need to hire people for it, there are lots of people that know Ruby on Rails. If I was like, I think Go, which is a new Google language, is awesome. It's super cool, but good luck finding anybody that knows how to program Go. So if you go use that, you're going to learn it. You're going to have to develop that skill internally, and then if you lose that programmer, you're going to have someone else is going to have to ramp up from nothing, basically. Whereas with Ruby on Rails, you can find great programmers that know it really well right now, and you can find more of them later. And then finally, the community that around it that supports it as far as the existing code base. Again, if you go do something in Go right now, you might go try to do something and realize that you need to write an SSL wrapper. And it's not going to be fun. You're going to be sitting there wondering, why the hell am I writing an SSL wrapper? This is not, again, back to like what you outsource, what you don't, what's core, what's not. This is not core. Like, I don't need to be writing an SSL wrapper, but there isn't one yet, so I got to go write one. In Ruby on Rails, you're never going to hit that problem. Like, whatever you go try to do, somebody else already did it. There's code out there you can go use, move a lot faster.
Where do you see the future of email marketing?
Future of email marketing. So I've been involved in email marketing for about 20 years now, hard to imagine. I found it to be very cyclical. I don't find that today's email marketing to be dramatically different than it was 20 years ago. I think the bigger change is going to be things like sale-through and other things that are doing where they're assembling a completely personalized email for you based on what you've done on the web and what you've looked at on Twitter and other things like that. And so it's like this kind of like integrated content marketing. That's probably one of the biggest shifts. And that really shifts the way you think about what you send, from thinking about it like, I got this list of people and I'm going to send this to everyone that's male and this to everyone that's female, to I've got all these people and all this content, and it's just going to figure out what to send to everybody. So it's a really different way of thinking. So I think that's a very new trend that's significant. Doesn't work for everything, works for some things. I think what's been great over the past 10 to 15 years is actually just, I think spam filters have gotten really good. And so I think they're well designed right now so that you get stuff that you generally want, whether you think you want it or not. But you get stuff that you ask for, click on, interact with, and if you don't, those things go away. And I think that works pretty well. What I've seen over the past 5 to 10 years is the emails people want get better and better deliverability, and the emails people don't want get worse and worse deliverability. It seems to be working pretty well. So the big message to an email marketer today is you have to send stuff people want. Send emails people are going to open and are going to interact with, and then you'll be effective and get good emails. What I do see happening, and this has taken way too long, but it's really starting to happen now, is emails are becoming more like web pages. An email really is a web page, but due to some really antiquated security concerns, they disable everything in the email so that JavaScript doesn't work and CSS doesn't work right and all these other things. I don't think there's much need for that anymore, and so I think we're going to see more and more interactive stuff in email. The email itself will be more dynamic. The content should be able to change at the time that you open it, and also more being able to transact within the email, be able to click on a button and buy something, but never go to the website or confirm your flight reservation or lots of things like that. We're starting to see some of that. Google's been doing some really cool stuff with schema.org in the messages, so that in the subject line at the end you might see a little button to confirm your flight or RSVP to an Eventbrite or something like that. We're going to see more of those types of things. So that's kind of where I see it going. I'll give my one big email marketing tip that I think most people don't really get. So I can't stand no reply emails. I don't think you ever want to send an email that comes from no reply for two reasons. One, if somebody hits reply, you want to see it. Like whatever it was, like that's your customer giving you feedback, and like you want to see that. Like somebody wants to see that. And it used to be like you had to worry about like, oh, I'm gonna get bounce messages, I'm gonna get all this other crap, like whatever. Those are easy to filter out. Like you want to see if somebody writes back, you want to see it. They're trying to buy something, they're trying to give you feedback, you want to hear it. Second thing is what a lot of people don't understand is the number one best signal to the spam filter that you are not spam is somebody replying. So actually, you should be encouraging people to reply to your emails. Like, hey, like just hit reply. We'll send you this, or we'll give you something, because you want people to hit reply, because that's the best sign to the automated spam filter that you actually you're important, is that they reply to your email. Are you at time or?
Two more questions.
Okay, two more questions.
Some of the hottest startups in Austin right now?
Hottest startups in Austin?
Question number 3.
Who are the startups? Oh, okay. That's a good one. Hottest startups. So, I think growth companies, ones that are like scaling really fast, WP Engine, Sparefoot, Main Street Hub, and nobody can get offended if I miss any of these, because there's a million other ones. Ones that recently got funded, I'm really excited about. Pristine, who we mentioned, Cratejoy, which is doing subscription commerce, is really cool. A company called Nuve, that's doing kind of like global asset tracking. Some of the startups that are just kind of like, I think some of the next ones to get their Series A. There's a company here called Aceable that does mobile education, like mobile driver's ed to start. I don't know if you guys ever like watched a 8-hour driver's ed video that totally sucked, but they have like an app to do that now. And they're killing it. Another one's called Goodie Bag. Anybody use Goodie Bag at their office? Anybody order food for their office? No. It's like Favor or like food delivery, but for corporate offices, and they're killing it. They're doing super well. Lynx Labs has a 3D camera. That's super cool. Those are some.
Cool, thank you.
There's one more.
Are there any pitfalls or differences in starting a B2B startup versus a consumer-based startup?
I'm sure there are. They just tend to be very different types of businesses to build and to grow. The way you scale them, the way you sell them, the way you hire people, the types of talent and people you need to have are really different. So I do think they tend to have a very different mindset or different approach. I don't know if I have a specific, like, here's what's different about them, but everything's different about them at some level. And so, generally the bar is much higher for consumer products. The polish on the product itself, things like that are a lot harder. And the skill sets, I'd say, I think Austin's great. I think as far as like consumer marketing and B2C type companies, that's not something we have a ton of local talent for. I think it's the kind of thing, we're often likely to recruit somebody from outside of Austin to come here that has that kind of talent. I'm getting flagged off that we're out of time, but thank you all for coming today. Thanks for asking so many great questions. And hopefully I'll see you again in those questions.
Thanks, everybody. There's still beer, I think, in the back, and network, and we'll be here for a little bit longer. And thanks for coming out. Thank you.